All right, guys, welcome to my webinar today. This is a 5-week webinar series. My name is Joshua Pellisier, and we are going to be talking about mastering body language. There are a lot of different areas of body language I'm going to be going over. It's a ton of information. I mean, this is enough information for me to put it into 5 separate weeks worth of material. So I didn't do it all at one time because it would have been just 10 hours worth of straight content and it would have been like drinking from a fire hose. So I chunked it down into 5 different areas that we're going to be covering. We're going to go over each one in a different week, in a different webinar, and in a different video. And you should be able to get the bulk of the information that you need to get during the straight session. But if you have any questions at all, you can feel free to either comment somewhere on the page, or you can again, ask a question during the webinar, and I should be able to answer that as well. So my name is Joshua Pellisier. I authored a book that you bought called The Tao of Badass, and I know it's a pretty lofty name, and it's kind of a silly name, but I like it. And essentially, the reason why I called it The Tao of Badass is because 2 reasons. One is that I didn't want it to be all fluffy, and I didn't want it to seem like I was taking this too seriously, not just for me, but I didn't want the guys who were learning to take this stuff too seriously either. I mean, it's a very, very important area of my life, and I'm sure it's a very important area of your life, and that's why you're here. But at the same time, it will consume you if you don't watch out, and that's really what I teach guys to do, is not just be okay or good with women or even just great with women, but to kind of master this area. And there are lots of different levels of mastery and lots of different indications that you're close to mastery, and I'll go over a couple of those before I get into the actual material here, if you want me to sort of talk about that a little bit. So the different questions, there's different levels of questions that you'll ask, and this sort of indicate your different levels of mastery. Someone who's starting out in the very beginning of something, like a complete novice at something, asks a question that's more along the lines of what, as in what do I do, what do I say. They sort of need a lot of guidance. And as you begin to grow and get a little more comfortable, you begin to ask the question, how? So once you know what to do, then you're going to ask, well, how do I do that, right? So once you understand the what, you move on to the how. Once you've understood how to do something, usually the question then becomes, well, why does this work in the first place? Why am I doing this? I really want to understand sort of the breakdown of why this works in the first place, so I can I can recreate it in different situations, so I'm not always relying on this one technique or training or whatever it is. And the next and final sort of question of mastery is when. And that's a question of, when do I do this? Do I do this at this time and not at this time? And when's the proper time to do it, and whatnot? So when you're asking the question of when do I do this, you're really asking a question of savoir-faire. And savoir-faire means literally it means to be, to do, but the translation sort of becomes to do the right thing at the right time. And that really is what being savvy is all about, and what being attractive is all about. And today, during these different body language training and technique trainings that I'm going to be going through over the next 5 weeks with you, we're going to be going over a lot of what, a lot of how to, and we're going to be going over a lot of why. But the when questions are so specific that I really would like you to ask those on your own. So if you would like to know some when, and you do get to that point where you are asking when, it's a really good sign anyway. So, I'd love to hear your questions if you have any questions like that. I am going to be going through a lot of material today, and again, today's course is called this 5 weeks is called the 5-week Body Language Mastery course. I hope you like my presentation here. I really like it a lot. So what we're going to be covering in this course is called the 5 pillars of sex appeal. Now, there are a lot of people focus on mastering sort of one thing, and the Tao of Badass isn't about mastering one thing. It's about mastering this entire area of your life. And what I found as I was sort of developing skills moving forward, right when I first started out, by the way, I was absolutely horrible with women when I first started. I was just terrible, and it took me a long time to get better. But over time, I started to learn and started to sort of on my own in the beginning, started to learn how when certain things wouldn't work and certain things would work when I was talking to women. And then I just some point a switch sort of flipped in me when I met a girl. I think it was two different girls in a row where I just lost them because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And one of them in particular was just the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. And for me, it was really painful for me to lose them in a row like that because I was like, well, this is a pattern. I don't know what's happening here. Am I just waiting around for the right person to show up, or do I really have some kind of control over this? And I didn't want to believe that I was sitting around like a victim, waiting for something to happen to me. So I began to sort of study and learn. And I went through this journey of learning, and I realized it's not just one area; it's a lot of areas all at once. And that's sort of the sort of caveat here is that you have to sort of think about this like you're looking at spokes on a tire as you develop these different skills that you have. And the spokes are each spoke that you have is a different skill set. And if you only have one spoke or one skill set, like some people do, and you're sort of a one-trick pony, then you're going to be you can't have a tire. You can't ride your bike or whatever it is that has the rim at the time. So you can't work on one spoke. You have to have several. Even just having two or three is not really enough. You have to have every single spoke that sort of makes up an attractive man. And as you go through body language seems to have about 5 different areas as well. By the way, I just got a question from Nick Sanchez, who's a really good friend of mine. Nick was asking who Tim Houston is. Tim Houston is a very good friend of mine, and whenever I signed up for this presentation software, I used his name for it. So he's also my business partner, my assistant here. So you'll see when I talk, you'll see his name flashing, but but it's not Tim Houston. It's me. So it's not someone who sounds just like me, though that would be nice. So the 5 different pillars of sex appeal are, and I'm going to go into those now. They are eye contact, which is what we're going to be covering today. Touch, very, very crucial topic. This is entire books are devoted to this topic here as well. It's a really, really hard thing to master because most people give up when they start to see negative results, and it's a really difficult thing to push through and learn because you're already deep into the conversation by the time you realize you're getting rejected for touch. So it takes a lot of interactions and a lot of practice to get this down, so I can't wait to get over that. That'll be next week. Then we go into negative and positive body language. This is basically how to get someone to chase you by using your body language. If you have, if you're getting sort of a lot of women that are interested at first and then really quickly the attraction starts to die off, it's very likely that you're seeing you're a victim of having too much positive body language. So I'm going to teach you how to use proper negative body language to draw out a woman's attraction for you. Next, the following week, we're going to go over something called psychological space. Now, psychological space is something that doesn't get talked about a lot in this, in my industry and in the dating coach world or the pickup and attraction world. Psychological space is essentially understanding how to step into someone's sort of personal space and instead of entering their world, learn how to make them enter your world when you do it. And by that I mean really having it so that when you talk to a woman, she's fully engaged with you and fully paying attention to what you're saying and just drawn in by your energy. It's a really hard thing to teach, and I've broken it down, as I've broken down most things, into a science because I don't really like things that are hard to teach. I like to be able to break them down and make sense of them. Otherwise, what's the point of learning in the first place? So we're going to go over psychological space as well. And then finally, we're going to go over dominant body language. And I want to go ahead and talk about the difference between negative body language and dominant body language. Dominant body language is showing dominance, control, and power through your body language. And negative body language is showing non-neediness through your body language. There's a very, very big difference, and a lot of guys get this mixed up. And when you do get it mixed up, you overcompensate on one, and you don't know how to use the proper tool for the proper job. Now, I look at the skill sets and all these different spokes that I have as sort of like tools on a tool belt. And, when you start to learn these different skills, you get a new tool. But if you don't use all of your tools at the right time, then it's kind of like trying to, hammer in a nail with a screwdriver. It doesn't really work very well. You can do it, but it's going to look terrible and you're going to be really frustrated. So it's much better to figure out which tool to use on which job. And that's not a sexual innuendo, so don't go there. But dominant body language is one of the most important areas of body language as well, and I'm really happy to talk about that as well. So again, if you have any questions at all during this or even afterward, you can always post a comment and I will get back to you as soon as I see the comment in there. So feel free to do that. But today, we're going to be going over sort of an intro, and then we're going to go straight into the first topic. But we read body language with our subconscious minds. Now, what does that mean? Essentially, it means that our conscious minds are picking up on all sorts of things, but our conscious minds are too narrow and too overloaded to understand all of the body language traits. And we're talking tons and tons of micro movements and little tiny things that people do that we're all picking up with our subconscious minds. And just to kind of give you an idea, your conscious mind, for every sort of one bit of information that your conscious mind processes, as in, one memory or one thing you notice, or if you're looking around and you're seeing, the color of something or the texture of something, and you're consciously aware of that, well, your subconscious mind is processing for every one bit of information your conscious mind processes. Your subconscious mind is processing 10,000 bits of information. That's a lot of information. That's a lot of work, and your conscious mind, if you had to do that consciously, you would just be overloaded all the time, and that's not efficient for a species. So we don't do that. We log things in our subconscious mind, and then we sort of bring them out through a couple of different ways, and I'll go into that today in today's class. So what does this mean that 10,000 bits of information processed by your subconscious mind? What does it mean for you, when you want to learn about how to attract and talk to and meet beautiful women? And it's not just meeting them. Any guy can meet women. It's really about knowing exactly how to attract women, which is a skill that most men do not have in the world. And most of these things I'm going to be teaching you today, guys do not know. So I'm very happy to be able to teach you. So what that means is that women will trust your body language more than they trust what you're saying. Now, this is a very, very important concept. I know a lot of people who have not sort of cracked this code right here and come to this realization. One of the ways you can tell if someone has not come to this realization is that they're still trying to sort of recite things or use what are called routines or memorize lines or pickup lines just to say so that a woman will be attracted to them. But the truth is that women don't care what you're saying. They're not even listening to what you're saying really in the beginning, and most of the time they're not in an environment to where they could hear you in the first place. The truth is that they're watching your body language, and they're trying to see whether or not they're attracted to you by reading your body language. Now, women don't choose to be attracted to you. It's not like they go, well, now I know what, this guy makes sense. He's got all the qualities there. I'm going to be attracted to him. That's not what they do. Instead, they sort of get a feeling that happens below the surface on a subconscious level. And that subconscious level, the language of that subconscious mind and the subconscious brain is body language. And so essentially what I'm teaching you how to do in this 5-week body language mastery course is mastering the art of invoking attraction in a woman without ever having to say anything. And that's really crucial. If you've ever been around me, or if you ever get the opportunity to be around me, you'll notice that I don't say much that makes sense when I'm talking to women. I'm kind of just joking around, and I get very, very, very good results, obviously, with women. And I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've tried everything you could think of. This is the bottom line, that women trust your body language more than they trust what you're saying. And so they're going to be looking to your body language, which is why this is so important. So I'm going to go over something that looks a little strange here. It's called 20-20-60. And essentially, I'm going to go into different components here, and I hope I don't lose you during this. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We're going to go over the first 20. The first 20 stands for 20% of your communication is verbal content. That means what you're saying. So 20% of communication, information that gets passed, is the actual verbal content. You probably recognize this if you've sent an email and someone took it completely wrong, or sent a text or something, and you meant one thing and someone took it a completely different direction. The reason why they did that is because they're interpreting only 20% of what you're saying. So when you're texting or when you're sending a message online or whenever you are sending an email or whatever, it's very, very important that your tonality, that you know that your tonality is not going in, and you know that the rest of the areas of communication are not involved. And so you make sure you're extremely clear. The next 20 is all about vocal tonality. So another 20% of communication is vocal tonality. Let's see here. Just want to go ahead and make sure I answer everyone's questions here. All right. Vocal tonality is how you talk. So essentially, I could say the same thing twice. One would be, "Hey, how's it going?" And the other one could be, "Hey, how's it going?" So those are two totally different things. So one may sound a little bit strange because it's an example, but one gives you a certain feeling, one gives you another feeling. So because of this feeling that's involved during the tonality of what I'm saying, you're allowed to now get an extra 100% of information as opposed to if you were just reading it. So you would double the amount of information that you're getting just by hearing the way I say something. So on this, for example, on this video that you're watching now, this class, you are getting 40% of the total communication possible. Now, I have other things moving in front of you that are sort of mimicking body language, so you can sort of get a visual representation for that. But it's not full. It's not utilizing the full 100% of communication, because the 60 and the final sort of 60% of communication is all about body language. So the majority of your communication will come across in your body language. And this is one of the reasons why women know this, and this is one of the reasons why women trust this more than they trust what you're saying or even how you're saying it when they first meet you. And when you first meet a woman is whenever it's most important to make sure that you have the body language down and the attraction down, because attraction can dissipate immediately if you don't understand how to communicate it via body language. So today, as you know, or you may or may not know, but now you will, we're going to be going over the topic of eye contact. Eye contact is one of my favorite topics. It's one of the least talked about. And in fact, I know a couple of guys who do this exclusively. They just teach eye contact because it is a very, very powerful concept. Now, I think that I've used this, especially in areas where you can't talk very much. It's one of the most powerful ways to meet women. Not just meet them, but attract them. And at the same time, it takes a lot of guts to do it properly, and it takes a lot of practice to do it properly. These concepts are not for people who are trying to sort of keep their egos high and trying to, be the tough dude all the time. Tough dudes are not very good at eye contact. You may think otherwise. It may be counterintuitive, but they're not. And the reason why they're not is because they have something to hide. They have something to protect. Eye contact, and which I'll get into all today, obviously, on this call, is a very, very honest art and a very honest skill. And if you're not good at it and you have some reservations on it, it'll come across immediately, which is why it's so important to master this area. And a lot of women, and you can ask any of your female friends, a lot of women hold eye contact as a very powerful, attractive quality in a man. If you can hold eye contact and it's sort of straight and solid, then you are considered to be much more attractive than if you're sort of darting around and you don't know how to keep a solid eye contact held. So you may remember earlier when I was talking about the first girl that I ever sort of really, really loved, and that I couldn't keep the attraction together with her. One of the first things that drew me to her was our eye contact that we had with each other, and I didn't have the ability to really attract her at the time. But many years later now, I have went back and I actually got her. So I went back after maybe 8 years of studying this and becoming really a master of this area of attracting women. I've been with so many women, and I've dated tons. I've dated multiple women at the same time, openly. I've broken every rule you could think of, and I've made every mistake you could think of. And after all of that, I went back and I got her. And that to me was the reason why I got into this in the first place. And I talk a lot in the Tao of Badass about your intentions and why you get into this in the first place, why you want to study and why you want to learn. And I push and strongly suggest that you think about why it is you really want to get good at this in the first place before you move forward. Because whatever it is you want, you will get at the end of it. If you want to get laid a lot, you will, but you'll probably be unfulfilled. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I've been there. I've been there where it's like every night I could be with a different woman, but I got lazy and I got tired and I didn't really care about it. It's for some guys, but it's just not for me. So I had to keep myself on track. And no matter what your choice is, if you do just want to go get laid, that's fine. There are plenty of ways to do that. But I got into this because I wanted to attract my future wife. And I really believe that I've done a very good job of doing that. With eye contact here, it's one of the most powerful ways to draw a woman in. That's what we're going to go over today. We have a lot to cover. I'm just going to jump straight into it here. Good eye contact shows core dominance and core confidence. You've probably heard the expression that the eyes are the window to the soul. Well, a lot of women would agree with this. They'd agree that by looking into a man's eyes, if he intrigues you at that moment, then it's such a powerful connection and it's such a powerful attraction that it's really hard to break it. And once you really understand how to master, and like by the end of this class today, you should have enough knowledge to be able to master the art well enough so that you can draw women in just by looking at them in a certain way and with a specific thing in mind. But again, it will show your true level of confidence and your true level of dominance. So it's really important that you, if you haven't read The Tao of Badass, finish reading that book as well, because I do go over a lot about how to build that core confidence and show that core dominant quality. And of course, in a future webinar, we'll be getting into dominant body language as well, so you don't have to worry about that. Lack of eye contact, though, will show weakness and submission. Most women will, and I'd say a vast majority, probably 9 out of 10 women, are not attracted to submissive men. It doesn't mean that you need to be, balls to the wall, kind of jackass, hard dude. It's like really angry, but you don't need to be aggressive or anything like that. That's an overcompensation. Being aggressive is an overcompensation for fear of showing weakness. But lack of good eye contact will show submission and will show that anytime another guy comes up and starts talking to her, you're, instead of standing strong and holding your place and showing her that you are you feel like you deserve her, you're going to back down, you're going to back away, and this other guy's going to be able to step right in. Now, we could go into a lot about the evolutionary psychology as to why this is important and why it came about in the first place. But the truth is, for me, that doesn't really matter that much. I think for a lot of people, it might, but for me, it doesn't, because I believe we live in a totally different world than we did whenever we were afraid of being killed by someone, by approaching someone from a neighboring tribe or something like that, back in the caveman days. But I do believe that we still have a lot of lingering, very visceral connections to these different gender roles. The male gender role, typical male gender role, being the dominant and provider protector, but now it's sort of morphed into the social provider and social protector. And the female gender role being the empathizer, sort of the weaker, meeker, smaller, frail, fragile, and submissive version. But she will not become that woman for you unless you are the man that she wants you to be, that makes you feel comfortable enough to do that. And in order to make her feel comfortable enough to be submissive and to be that sort of frail, fragile woman, then delicate really is the word I'm looking for. A delicate woman, then you have to show positive, strong, and dominant body language. And this, of course, eye contact is one of those. So I want to talk a little bit about the subconscious power of facial feature reading. I'm going to go over what I mean by that. I just want to check real quick to make sure that we don't have any questions here. We're good? Okay, feel free to ask questions if you'd like. So let's go into the power of facial feature reading. Now, I've read a book called Blink. It's from a guy named Malcolm Gladwell. And let me just go back here. Here we go. And Blink, I definitely recommend it. It's a great book. But in this book, it talks a lot about the power of blink decisions, of immediate decisions. And this book here really shaped a lot of the things that I teach. Not directly in the very beginning, but over time has really shaped a lot of the stuff that I've learned and I've integrated into how I meet and attract women, and sort of made sense of a lot of stuff that I couldn't make sense of before. but I definitely recommend it, by the way. But and I don't get a kickback for saying this, by the way. It's just a very, very good book. But I do. One of the ideas that he talks about here is he went and studied someone who had been focusing a lot on minor facial feature reading, and they had sort of looked at these different facial features that people would make, and they were breaking them all apart and taking all the little minor, tiny details. I have this illustration here of people apparently from the 70s. I don't know where I got this, but essentially this is as you look through, you can see that you get a sense of how each person is feeling. This may be something you don't even think about anymore, but you could probably notice though, if I take away, let me go up here again. If I take away the tops and bottoms of everything and just leave their eyes here, you'll get a sense of that you can still understand the way that they're feeling. And I'll kind of show you that right now. And just jump straight to it here. There's a version of it right there. If we just cut off their mouths, their foreheads, everything else, and just showed their eyes, you can kind of get a sense that you still understand how these people are feeling. Because most of the communication that we have, that we give through body language, comes from our eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and go through something really quickly and just sort of touch on it. I want to go through the sort of level at which why body language is such an important thing to learn. Well, your body language is the first thing that people see to gauge attraction. The reason why they see it and they trust it so much is because it's controlled by your emotions. Now, what does that mean? That means that you feel something and your body acts it out without you even thinking about it. You're doing this all the time. In fact, you're doing it right now, and you don't even realize you're doing it because it's acting fully on a subconscious level. If you were aware of it, it becomes conscious, and then you don't have the same kind of power that you would if you weren't aware of it. So, sort of by default, you take this subconscious approach to your body language. Your body language, then, by the way, is controlled by your emotions, and your emotions are controlled by your beliefs. Now, essentially what women are doing when they're reading your body language subconsciously, and they're sort of built naturally to do this, they're reading your body language to assess your emotion, to figure out what your beliefs are. Now, I think a typical question here would be, does that mean that if I change my belief, it'll trickle down and change my emotion, which will trickle down and change my body language? And the answer is yes. The answer is definitely yes. That if you believe you're an attractive guy, you start to feel like you're an attractive guy. And if you feel like you're an attractive guy, you start to act like an attractive guy. And the funny thing is that when you start to act like an attractive guy, you become an attractive guy. But it just takes time for it to trickle down, and you have to work on it's most important for most people to work on the body language thing first, then work on the emotions, then work on the beliefs. If you can go straight to beliefs, I highly suggest doing that. But ultimately, I'm going to give you the power so that if you do get emotional and you are kind of, messed up a little bit emotionally, like you're nervous or whatever, you don't sort of lose it all. As you move forward with the interaction, you can still keep the attraction going. So again, what this sort of leads into is that I want you to always assume that women can read your mind, because they're reading so much information that's going on subconsciously. Like I said, 10,000 bits of information for every 1 bit of conscious information. Because they're reading so much subconsciously, and because that's what creates the attraction, they're looking at you, and mostly looking at your eyes during this time to recognize whether or not you're an attractive person. And they are going to be reading what's on your mind. It's very difficult to hide something from a woman. In order to truly hide something, if you wanted to do that, you'd have to have your entire body in alignment with what it is you're trying to hide. And today I'm going to go over a lot of stuff, including how to tell if someone's lying to you, and we'll go into a few other things as well. But this was sort of the concept. Now, why should you always assume that women can read your mind? Well, there's a very simple answer for that, and that is because they can. I know it seems kind of silly, but they really can. They may not know exactly what you're thinking, but they do know whether or not you're faking it. And this is the most important thing, because as you move forward, it's going to be kind of crucial for you to be able to control your body language to the level at which you may feel sort of unnatural. You may feel like, oh, well, you have a little bit more control than you thought you would, and you're sort of choosing to attract certain people, and that should be your power. It should be your right to be able to choose that, whether or not someone's attracted to you, and that's something I fully believe. But as you go forward, again, women will be able to read your mind as we go through this, and body language is a very important area. And what we have, and most of the guys, and I'm guessing that you're the same way. I know this is how it was for me. Is that I really believed that that it was possible for me to meet and attract beautiful women in my life, and just sort of be one of those guys that would have this area sort of handled for me. But I just had these old beliefs that had caught up that are sort of still stagnant there, that were from when I was younger, that didn't really work for me anymore, and I didn't know how to get rid of them. So I started learning how to control my body language and things, and it sort of trickled up into me realizing that I actually was an attractive guy, and it wasn't until I realized that it started working for me. Now you may be thinking, well, what if you're not an attractive guy? I guess that's a pretty good question, and if that's exactly what I mean. I mean, I felt this exact same way. I thought I wasn't an attractive guy, and I had girls that would say that was true. I would had a lot of relationships in the beginning where women would leave me for more attractive guys, and I just didn't know what it was. I would try to, I'd do anything really, work out. I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe I could go and be an intelligent guy route or be a sensitive guy route, and that didn't work. But anyway, if you tried all those different things, you've like I have, you've likely seen some minor success with that, and then seen a big issue with it, and that it isn't sustainable and doesn't work long term. So I'm going to go into a lot of that stuff today. All right, this is a really awesome area. I wanted to go over it a little bit first, and but we're not going to touch on it right now. This is the big circle of eye contact techniques. We're going to go into these at the very end of this call. But first, we're going to go over a few other things first, just so I know that we're on the same page. But we'll come back to this. I just wanted to show you a little bit about what you have to look forward to, and so on. But again, if you have any questions at all, anyone, go ahead and feel free to ask those questions right here in this course as I move forward. All right, let's continue. Let me go back here. All right, let's go into one of my favorite topics, and that is eye accessing cues. Now, eye accessing cues are one of the most beautiful, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful skill sets to learn. We're going to cover two things today in this class. We're going to cover reading her eye accessing cues, and we're also going to cover using your eye accessing cues. So I'm going to go back here. Sorry, zooming into the wrong part there. So let's flip around here to how to read her eye accessing cues. Now first, before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about what eye accessing cues are. Eye accessing cues are a concept that has been widely accepted in the world of neurolinguistic programming and a lot of psychology, that when you look in different directions, you access different parts of your brain. Now, this has been supported a lot. I'm not sure if anyone's ever done a study that was so conclusive that everyone has accepted this. It's a relatively new concept, but there are a lot of people that use this, and a lot of different for example, the government uses a lot of this. A lot of governments do. A lot of different casinos use this to tell whether or not you're cheating, things like this. And so it's something that we spend a lot of money learning how to do, and I'm going to teach you the ins and outs of using eye accessing cues while you're attracting, so you can understand eye contact and you can sort of read a woman's mind as well as she's reading yours. But I want you to be able to do this consciously. Now first, let's go over reading her eye accessing cues. So let's talk about what you're going to be able to do by doing this. It's kind of like looking at a woman, and if I had to sort of explain it, it's kind of like being able to look at a woman and tell whether or not she is attracted to you, thinking of someone else, lying to you, whether or not she is tired, distracted, unattracted, deeply and seriously sexually attracted to you, in love with you, and you can tell whether or not she just wants to be friends with you, or you're falling down that route of just wanting to be friends. You can tell a whole lot just by knowing how to read her eye accessing cues. So sort of going into what you'll be able to do by learning this, you'll be able to tell when she's lying or when she's thinking about lying especially. You'll be able to predict sort of which topic she'll be emotionally attracted to, and we'll go into that in a bit. You'll be able to control whether or not she gets emotionally invested in your conversation, which I can tell you is a very, very powerful skill set to have. If you can sort of control whether or not she's emotionally invested, that means that you can anytime you want to, you can draw out of her this deep emotional connection and deep emotional attraction for you. And being able to sort of trigger these different eye accessing cues is a really crucial thing. I don't really teach it much because I think a lot of guys would use it for bad, for evil, and plus it needs, you need a lot of understanding before you can get to this point of just how to attract women in general. So I'm going to go over that today, though, and since you're on my sort of advanced course here, and you've gotten a hold of this body language training course, I wanted to go ahead and give it to you now. So, let me go back, and you're also going to learn how to draw out sort of forgotten memories from her during the conversation while you're talking. You learn how to do all of this just by reading her eye accessing cues. Let's go ahead and dive into the first one here. Let's imagine that she's looking up and to her right. Now, first, I want to clarify that whenever you're looking at someone else and you're learning eye accessing cues, it's imperative that you realize their eye accessing cues are reversed to yours. So up and to her right is, as you see here, up and to your left. That's why you see it pointed up and to the left here. If you were to learn this the other way around, you probably wouldn't have the ability to truly read someone's eyes as well as you need to. You'd probably read them backwards. Now, another thing I should point out here is that some people have what are called reversed eye accessing cues. And reversed eye accessing cues means that whatever I say is left here will be right for them, and whatever I say is right here will be left for them. So the best way to do this is to really just test to see what you think she will be, or he, I guess, depending on who you're talking to, but for our purposes here, what she would be thinking right now, and sort of get a sense as to whether or not she is accessing her left or right brain, I guess, essentially by looking left or right in these different times. So, but we're going to assume that that she has sort of a standard view. And again, I've seen other diagrams that are drawn up that are exactly the opposite of this. So take it with a grain of salt, but just remember that my left may be someone else's right. But when you're looking at her directly and she's looking at you and she looks up and to her right, then that accessing cue is called visual memory. So visual memory essentially means that she's imagining something that has happened already. So looking up and to the right, you should be able to recall memories a little bit better than if you're looking down to the right or up and to the left or down to the left, especially down and to the left. So visual memory is an eye accessing cue that will allow you to access those pictures or moving pictures as short clips in your mind of things that you've seen before in the past. So when you see a woman who is looking up and to her right, again, that's if she's looking at you, it would be your left, the same direction this arrow is pointing right here, then that means she's probably accessing her memory and she's imagining something from her memory. Now, you can also ask what are called control questions to figure out whether or not she has reversed eye accessing cues. Control questions are like when you ask a question that you know she has to imagine something from the past in order to answer, such as, do you remember the color of your house when you were growing up? And she'll probably say yes, and she'll probably tell you what that is. So, if you ask her a question like that and you see what direction she's looking up in, you can sort of calibrate to figure out which direction she's looking in and whether or not she has reversed or standard eye accessing cues. So again, that's called her or your visual memory. Women will use this whenever they are sort of having a lighthearted conversation. They'll also use this, though, when they're trying not to think of something sexually. When they're trying to think of something that's not sexual, they'll look up in this direction. They'll also look up and to the left, and I'll tell you what that means in a bit. So let's go ahead and jump into the next one. Here's that next one here. When she looks up and to her left, then she is accessing an eye accessing cue called conceptual visual eye accessing cue, or your conceptual vision. So this essentially means that she is imagining something visually that she has never seen before. This is crucial because if you this sort of plays a big role in whether or not someone's lying to you. If you ask them a question like, where were you last night? And they look up and to their left, they very well may be thinking about lying to you. This is a crucial concept. I don't want you to go all crazy on me and try to, you can't make this a be all end all here. You can't just say that, oh, you look up and to the left and so you're lying. That's not kind of how it is. There's a lot of leeway with this, and you're looking for clusters. But whenever, clusters of body language traits, let's say that she was covering her chest, crossing her arms, looking up into her left, and then also furrowing her brow, or maybe getting aggravated or angry as she's talking. Now, it's very likely then that she's lying because it's a cluster of lying tells. But I'll talk a little bit more about how to tell whether or not she's lying to you in a little bit. But for now, if she looks up and to her left, she's imagining something visually. Now, one thing I want to talk about here for a second is that if you see her looking in these different directions, it means that she's accessing that different part of her brain. But you can also invoke these different parts of her eye accessing cues by drawing her attention to this area. So, for example, if you're describing something and you put your left hand up, she's going to look up at your left hand, which is going to be up and to her right. So if you want her to remember something visually, and you want it to be easier for her to do so, if you tell her to look up at your hand, this has to be a deep conversation. Obviously, you don't just walk up to a girl and be like, look at my hand. You might, I guess, but you probably wouldn't want to do that. You would be able to invoke this sort of memory with her. And again, of course, if you held up your right hand or had told her to look at something that was sort of up on the ceiling or somewhere up into her left, you would be able to allow her to imagine something a lot better. And you can sort of draw her in. Women find this very, very, very attractive, that you can control this emotional state within them. It draws to them, it's a direct correlation to how you're going to act within the bedroom. And they see this sort of dominant and powerful man as being someone who they believe can lead them into extreme ecstasy in the bedroom, and also will be able to control whenever they sort of break out in emotional fits. If they do that every once in a while, you'll sort of be able to control it and be able to stay calm during the process and not sort of flip out or get angry. So let's look at the next one. The next one is whenever she looks down and to her right. Again, that's when you see it down to your left. Down and to her right, she's accessing her emotional memory. This is probably one of the most powerful eye accessing cues available, because it asks us to draw on things that we have felt in the past. And usually we draw on very powerful emotional memories. And when a woman starts to experience these emotional memories with you, she starts to build up massive amounts of trust with you. And again, I'm going to go over how to use these different accessing cues in the next section here in a bit. But just know that for now, if she's looking down into her right, or for you, if you're looking at her, it's down into your left, then she's accessing her emotional memory. Now, one way you can use this is that if you see her looking down that direction, and you're talking about something like, I don't know, my go-to conversation here, for example, is baseball. So let's say that you're talking about baseball, and all of a sudden she looks down into her right. Actually, I'll use a real-life example. One time I was dating this girl, and I was sort of just in the very beginning of meeting her, and we went on a date. And she was a PR agent, but she refused to tell me what who her clients were. So I was like, okay, well, I don't really care. It doesn't really matter to me. I was in New York, so we went out and we had a drink. I was drinking a Guinness, which is my drink of choice, by the way. If you ever want to buy me one, I'm totally down for having one. But I was having this Guinness, and we were talking, and the Rolling Stones came on. I'm just sort of talking to her. And again, as I'm talking, I'm watching her eye accessing cues to see if I get a strange tell, so that I can see whether or not she's lying about certain things. I can see whether or not she's a very visual person, whether or not she's emotionally involved in something, and so on and so forth. So what I do is I was talking to her, and the Rolling Stones came on. I said, oh, I love the Rolling Stones. And immediately she looked down and to the right. And I was like, okay. I made a mental note. I said, okay, well, that's interesting. So once I got that sort of tell, that note for myself, then I went straight into trying to figure out and uncover what it is that what it is about the Rolling Stones that makes her emotional. So you have to I sort of went and elaborated a bit and talked about it a bit more in more detail. So I said, oh, I feel like I connect with Mick Jagger on some level. And I had a friend at the time who connected with Keith Richards, and and I was like, if they met them, and I'd have to obviously introduce him to my friend first, and blah blah blah. I just sort of went into this little thing and was smiling and talking, and every time I said the word Mick Jagger, I saw she looked down to the right again. So I could say the Rolling Stones now, and she wouldn't look down to the right, but if I said Mick Jagger now, she would. So immediately I knew that she had an emotional memory around Mick Jagger. Now it could mean that her father listened to Mick Jagger, or knows Mick Jagger, or is Mick Jagger, or it could mean that when she was little she used to like Mick Jagger. Who knows? But I sort of gathered from her being a PR agent, and then her not wanting to tell me who her clients were, and then her having an emotional association with Mick Jagger, that she was representing the Rolling Stones. And the next words that came out of her mouth were, I didn't want to tell you this, but I actually represent the Rolling Stones. And I was like, I know you do, because I could tell, because I'm reading your eye accessing cues. It's just a really fascinating thing to sort of give you a window into how to use this in everyday conversation with women and how to attract them. Of course, that's a really powerful thing. She was very, very attracted that I was able to do that. And not only that I was able to do that, but that I didn't just call it out and guess. I dug a little bit deeper to figure it out and drew it out of her. And it's really entertaining for me to watch a woman sort of go through these different emotional associations. I really like it because it makes me feel like I really have a lot of control. So again, down and to her right is her emotional memory. And then we're going to go to the final, which is down and to her left, which is going to be your conceptual emotion or conceptual emotional brain. Now, down to the left is one of the rarer accessing cues. A lot of people use this for sort of internal monologue. It's where you're accessing your emotion, but it's concept, something that you haven't felt already in the past. You're sort of creating it now, or you're imagining it now. But it's not imagining something visually. It's sort of talking to yourself. Like, I don't know, what do you think about that? I'm not really sure how I feel about this. And is she really doing this? Does she like me? Does she not like me? It's sort of this internal monologue that you have with yourself. Hopefully you don't have an internal dialogue, but if you have multiple personalities, I guess you do. How do I tell them I have no internal monologue? But anyway, so we have that's your internal monologue area. So if she's looking down into her left, down into her left, which is down into your right, whenever she's looking at you, and you see her look down in that direction, sort of the bottom right quadrant of your view, then she's probably thinking to herself like, I'm screwing this up, or what are you saying? Or she might be saying, what if he doesn't like me? Or all these different thoughts and these different loops and tapes, so to speak, that we have going through in our minds. We replay these through this quadrant, so you can tell what she's feeling in that respect by looking at that quadrant. Now, all of these eye accessing cues, through reading them on a woman, will allow you to sort of peer into and read her mind a bit. Definitely uncover some things about her that she doesn't even know how to express, or definitely doesn't think that about her. And whenever you bring them out in a really understanding and caring way, and you don't sort of belittle her for those concepts, those different thoughts or anything, then you have a very, very strong and powerful connection with her, because she will feel like she's revealed to you some really deep, dark secrets, and you didn't flinch. You just accepted her fully. And we are much more likely to be attracted to somebody who is already accepting of us. So that's why it's important to be able to read these things and these different eye accessing cues. So we're going to move on to the next thing. Well, actually, first I'm going to go over Lie to Me, apparently. I forgot that I put this in here. The whole show, Lie to Me, is really about reading these different eye accessing cues and looking in the different directions that people look, and reading body language to be able to tell whether or not they're lying. But I'm going to go over something that you can use to tell whether or not someone actually is lying to you, and that's called dragging eye accessing cues. And I'm just going to check real quick to make sure we don't have any questions. I don't see any questions. So if anyone does have any questions, feel free to ask again. And if you do have a really big question, I can unmute you and I can actually hear what you have to say. So let me know, and I will answer that as soon as I can. So we're going to go over something called dragging eye accessing cues. Dragging eye accessing cues is essentially where you can tell whether or not someone is lying by the series of directions that they look in. So you can tell by when they look in certain directions, but there's also something someone does, which is called dragging a lie. And dragging a lie is essentially where you look in one direction. Let me just pull this back up. And then you sort of pull it over to the other direction. What you're doing essentially here is you're looking up. They're looking up into their left, so this is reversed here, so keep that in mind. They're looking up into their left first, which is the conceptual side. And this is when they're thinking of the lie, right? They're trying to imagine the lie that they can tell you. And then little by little, they're sort of, as they're talking, they're dragging it over in this direction to recall. So by the time they're finished talking about it, they're going to be looking up into their right, which is your left, and then they'll look at you and kind of feel like they've just submitted that as a true statement, right? And usually you'll see them kind of do this. They'll be here. They'll go, yeah, well, last night, and their eyes will sort of go in this direction, kind of back and forth like this. Well, last night I was out with some friends, and yeah, I got caught in traffic, and we got home really late because of that, right? So now they're here, and then they'll look at you, and that's sort of what you want to look for if you do want to tell whether or not someone's lying to you. Which again, you don't need to be caught up with. You don't need to be, overly obsessed with that concept. But if you do want to tell whether or not someone's lying to you, this is a very big indicator that they are lying to you. So keep that in mind. Again, it's called dragging a lie or dragging eye accessing cues. And that will sort of let you know whether or not they are lying to you. And again, you want to use this. You never want to end a relationship based on this, but you do want to get them to reveal to you that you do know, or you want to reveal to them that you do know that isn't true, and you want them to reveal to you that wasn't true, so there's no lying involved in your relationship in general. Again, you don't want to try to catch women in lies too early. I've met women that, and to be honest, women lied to me a lot. I mean, women lie. I mean, guys lie too. We lie. We try to pretend like we're more confident than we are. And women lie. They try to pretend like they're less needy than they are and stuff. And so whenever I see women lying to me, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I just look at it as if it was something that they don't want to own up to yet, especially early on in the relationship and in the interaction. If I'm still in the attraction phase, I will never, almost never, don't want to say never, I will almost never, very rarely call out a lie. I'll just make a mental note and I'll know more than they think I do. And that gives me a leg up. Once I've revealed that I know that they were lying, it sort of, drops all my power away and takes all my control away, and I don't have the upper hand anymore. So I want to keep that information to myself, and I want to use it to be able to know whether or not they're attracted, and try to see patterns, whether or not they keep lying or they don't lie very much. If they lie a whole bunch, I try to act like I'm cool with everything, so they don't have to lie to me, because they probably never met a man like that before. If they don't lie hardly at all, but they access their emotions a lot during the conversation, then I will be very, very serious with them whenever they get serious. I will not joke around because they will not be able to handle it. If I see them accessing their visual brain a lot, looking up into their right often, accessing their visual memory, then I'll talk a lot more about things that are vibrant from my past or things that are beautiful and paint a picture for them so that they can get a lot more of a connection with me. And if they're, if they're looking down to the left a lot, then I'll talk a little bit more about how I have an internal monologue and what I say to myself every once in a while, and blah blah blah. I may say that this isn't right, or I'm not good enough, or whatever, and I might reveal that to her. So it's a really powerful concept. We'll move on now, though. Zooming out here, and we're going to talk about how to use your eye accessing cues in the interaction as well. Just double check my time here. We have about an hour, a little less than an hour left here, so about 30 to 45 minutes left, so just want to let you guys know that. Feel free to connect. And again, if you have to drop off, no big deal. I will be able to replay this video later on, and you can just play it like a regular video, so no big deal. So let's go into how to use your eye accessing cues to attract her and to get her to feel different things. You're going to be able to, with these techniques, you're going to be able to invoke trust toward you, so have her trust you more. You'll also be able to bring out your own emotions during rapport. So that means that you'll be able to make yourself feel something that you want to connect with her on. I go into a lot of my book. I go into about rapport and connection, and it's it's a very powerful concept. So you'll also be able to keep yourself from getting too emotional or showing extreme signs of weakness too early on, and you'll also be able to more vividly remember your sort of ancient memories that are kind of older. So let's go over. I sort of combined all these together at one time right now. Right now, it's from your point of view. This is how I'm going to be speaking from here. So this is as if this is you actually looking at the screen right now. Your up and to your right is actually up and to your right now, because this is you in your brain. So up and to your right, again, is going to be accessing your visual memory. You want to look up and to your right whenever you're trying to remember something visually, of course, but also whenever you want someone to think that you're trying to remember something visually. For example, if you have something that you're not really too sure about, like if she says, let's say that she throws you off by saying, how many women have you slept with? And you don't necessarily feel comfortable with that. Maybe the number's too low. You feel like it makes you feel like you don't have enough options, or the number's too big and you're afraid you're going to scare her. While you're thinking about it, if you look up and to the left, she's not going to trust anything that you're saying. So while you're thinking about that number, whether or not you're going to lie, hopefully you don't have to, but keep your eye accessing cues up and to the right. Now, typically what I do is I tilt my head a little bit, and then I actually look up and to the right pretty solidly in order to bring back this memory. This makes people feel like, at the very least, and you can use this in other areas of your life too, that you are accessing your memory, your visual memory. Now, this is a very powerful thing because if you are accessing your visual memory, people will trust that whatever you're saying is actually something that you're remembering and not something you're making up. Very powerful to use. Up and to your left, this is going to allow you to sort of imagine things that are new. So if you're in a conversation where someone's talking to you and they're like, could you imagine what it would be like to blah, blah, blah? If you look up and to the right, they're going to get a disconnect from you in that moment. So you have to look up and to your left at that time and go, I could kind of imagine that, or whatever it is. Doesn't matter what you're saying at that point because most of the communication is coming across in these micro body language movements. And that's sort of the point here. Again, if you look down and to your left, this is going to be if you're in deep thought, not necessarily that you're in deep emotional recall here, but you are deciding how you feel about something right now. Again, it's if you're having to make a decision, that's a really big decision. Looking down to your left is a really good thing to do. Not only will it help you make that decision easier based on your emotion, but it will also allow you to project to them that you are taking this conversation and this question seriously. I have a problem. Sometimes I think things or I'll smile whenever I'm not actually happy, or I seems like I'm taking things not very seriously, but I am. So until I learned how to do this, it was really hard for me to go into a really serious conversation because I was afraid that someone was going to get angry at me because I wasn't taking it seriously. But as soon as I started doing this, I just sort of aligned myself and set it up so that when I looked down to the left, I was answering a question that would cause some deep thought for me. Down to the right was also for emotional recall for me. So if I was trying to remember how I felt about something, I would look down to the right. And this is the section I look into normally whenever I am building rapport with someone. I'll look down to my right because that's what they're used to seeing. They're used to seeing someone who's looking down and to the right. Again, that would be their left because they're looking at you. And they're used to seeing that whenever someone's being honest, true, and when they're being trustworthy. That's how you invoke trust with someone that you're talking to. If you want them to trust you, whatever it is that you're saying, you have to look down and preferably down to the right during that time. Otherwise, they're going to think that you're trying to sort of stave away any emotion that you might have. And if you do want to, if you do have some kind of emotion that you don't want to sort of take you over, you can look up and to the left and it will sort of get rid of that emotion. If you try to think about, for example, if you want an exercise, try thinking about your last relationship that failed and think about the breakup and how hard that was to go through. But look down and to the right as you're thinking about it. Think about, picture her in your head, but just look down to the right. Don't look anywhere else. And it sort of brings up all these emotions that you have. In fact, it happens to me right now too as I'm doing this. It's kind of subconscious. Now try looking up and to the left and doing the same thing. All the emotions are not there, but all the memories are still there. All of the concepts are still there. It's even hard for me to remember what she looked like or anything like that. So as you can see, that's a really strong demonstration as to the power and the effect of these different eye accessing cues for yourself. So that sort of leads me over into the next thing, and what I want to talk about here is the map of interaction and how eye contact plays into the map of interaction. I have another question here. Let me just read this question. Does it matter if you're right or left-handed? Nick asked that question. It's really interesting that you bring up that point, Nick, and that's a really, actually a really advanced question. No one really knows as to whether or not it matters if you're right or left-handed, but it's been suggested that left-handed people are more creative because they stimulate their left peripheral more. And of course, you know that your left peripheral is your conceptual brain. So people think that left-handed people are more creative because, this is a theory, of course, this hasn't been proven yet, but because they're always reaching out with their left hand to make things happen, to work, to pick stuff up, whatever. They're getting a lot of stimulation on their right brain, which is attached to their left peripheral. So as they reach out and do that, it does stimulate that conceptual brain more, and it's theorized that's why that they are more considered to be more creative people, and they sort of think outside the box. Of course, it's not true across the board, but it is a really good indicator. But there's no correlation, though, to reverse eye accessing cues based on whether or not they're right or left-handed. There's nothing that I've seen, and I've done a lot of studies myself. It's really all across the board. I've never found a pattern yet to tell just by looking at someone whether or not they have reversed eye accessing cues, unless I actually look at their eyes and I can tell. So if you've read The Map of Interaction, and it's a pretty large section of my book, in the Tao of Badass, and it's been taught in a lot of places. It actually originally comes from a concept of sales and marketing, that you have a group of people or a person that you're talking to, and you go through these different stages during that conversation with them. The first stage is the stage of attraction. That's where they're sort of curious about something, and a lot of salespeople will try to get you hooked on asking you questions like, do you have back pain? Do you also feel lonely? Do you want to be a millionaire? Okay, well, if you said yes to all three of those things, then you must need this product, right? That's kind of the idea of getting you curious. The way to make you curious in that instance is to ask you questions that are leading you into wanting to know more. Well, why are you asking me? Why is there an answer? Is there a solution to this? They want to create that curiosity. Next, they're going to build a rapport for you. They're going to make some kind of connection with you that says, hey, look, I'm like you too. I feel this way, right? Whatever. They're going to try to connect with you on some level and show some kind of emotion and vulnerability. And then they're going to seduce you with an offer and say you have to act, you have to get the answer, you have to consummate your desire for this right now. Now, you can imagine that this plays really well into attraction and meeting and attracting women. The guy who originally came up and took this sales concept and brought it over to the dating world and attracting women world is a guy named Eric Markovic, and you may have heard of him. Really smart guy. I don't think he really knew that he was coming up with something so brilliant whenever he did this at the time, but now I think he understands how powerful it is. I have taken concepts from all sorts of people, and I've broken down most of them to figure out that usually they're wrong. Usually there's something wrong with them, but this is one of those things that I've taken it apart 100 times, and it's just perfect in so many ways. There's only a couple little things in the Tao of Badass that I have to go over that are really important, that are different, in particular an area in attraction and then one in rapport. So let's go over how to use eye contact during attraction, and then how to use it in rapport, and then how to use it in seduction to sort of get through these different stages. During the stage of attraction, you're sort of having and I teach this a lot in the Tao of Badass as well. The mode you're in is sort of happy-go-lucky, sort of young or maybe kid mode. You're not acting like a kid, but you're lighthearted and fun and smiling and being light at the time. Nothing's really too serious. This is a really important concept, and a lot of guys try to shun this because they think that it's a lot of work, or that it feels fake, or whatever. Or they're nervous, and so they don't want to pretend like they're not nervous, so they get really serious. But they're not serious either, They just become serious because they want to hide the fact that they're nervous. So whenever we're in the state of attraction, the eye contact that you should use is a really light, fun, smiling, and fleeting eye contact. That is, you can look at someone solid for a few seconds, but you can look away whenever you want to. After about 3 to 5 seconds, you probably do want to look away. You probably don't, in most situations. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes if you want to skip straight to seduction and really seduce a woman, you can keep and hold that eye contact, and you can walk toward her with the eye contact, and that's a really powerful technique to use, and it helps you sort of progress through the stages of the map of interaction really quickly, and I'll talk a little bit about that during the big circle O techniques a little bit later on. During rapport, the eye contact you're going to be using is going to be very solid. You're not going to look away at all. As you and this is something I had to learn how to do. I had to learn how to express the way I felt without looking in any direction, just looking straight at their eyes as I was doing it. And when you do this, it's such a powerful rapport technique, and the rapport is so solid and concrete that women will feel just so drawn into you. It's an amazing, it's sort of a tip or trick or a technique or a skill to learn. It's really like a sneaky thing though, because if you are thinking really confident or projecting really confident thoughts, so to speak. I know it sounds kind of strange, and I'll go over that in the technique section. During the stage of rapport, while you're making eye contact, she's butter in your hands. And I'll go into how to do that later. How to do that a little bit later. And last, there's seduction. And during the stage of seduction, you're going to be sort of combining what you had used the first two attraction and rapport stages, and you'll be doing them both at the same time. And that is, you'll be smiling and you'll be looking directly at her eyes without looking away. That's sort of the combination. But this time you'll be thinking of really powerful sexually charged ideas. And they do come across whenever you are talking to a woman and whenever you're looking at a woman. You can really project that feeling and that emotion. That's been tracked and tested a lot of times for a long period of time. People have used this and I have a friend who you'll get to the opportunity to hear at some point on an interview in the if you're a member of the members only area. I have an advanced coaches prep course that I teach. It sends out a video every couple of days with teaching a technique, and if you are a member of that, then you'll be able to hear my interview with him. He was a spy for the U.S. government, and his job was to go in and seduce. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but seduce people at parties that were working for organizations in order to get information out of them. So he literally had to approach women that he didn't know. He had these series of movements he did, and he would seduce them and then get information out of them. I know it sounds like something out of a movie, but it's real, and it was his real job. And he actually quit the job eventually because he was doing so much lying to people all the time that it was just really strange for him. He didn't like it. But it's a really awesome techniques, and it's a really powerful concept. It's been used by a lot of governments for a long period of time, and it's been proven. So now we get to everyone's favorite part here, the big circle of eye contact techniques. As I go through these, if you have any questions at all, again, feel free to ask those questions, and I will answer those questions. We have about 30 minutes left max. And hopefully you can, you'll be able to get on this, I'll be able to answer any questions you have. And at the end of this, if you do have any questions as well that are not pertaining to anything we talked about today, I can unmute you and we can all talk for a second, or we can just have a conversation about whatever. So stick around and I'll do that. And I'll have to leave in about, I definitely have to leave in about 45 minutes. But if we get done before then, we'll be able to have a conversation and chat. So again, let's go ahead and dive right into these different techniques. First, let's talk a little about, and I sort of mentioned this earlier, let's talk about projecting your state. And this is, as I was saying, looking at a woman and sort of showing her or sending an emotion to her without ever saying anything. So projecting what you're thinking into a woman's eyes through eye contact. And so there are a couple of really famous people that have taught this. Outside of the world of NLP, which is littered with all sorts of concepts around projecting your state. NLP, by the way, is neuro-linguistic programming, is something that I've studied as well. And I will be teaching a course on NLP using neuro-linguistic programming to attract women and create confidence within yourself, and the techniques that I did learn in the future. But for now, I'll go over just this one concept. Projecting your state is essentially playing on an idea that I sort of touched on earlier. The idea that you cannot, no matter what you do, you cannot hide what you're thinking, right? So since that's the truth and that's the case, why not use what you're thinking to project onto the other person? So project what you're thinking onto them so that they can pick it up. Now, again, remember that they're picking this up subconsciously. So you can't send a phone number through eye contact, because it's not specific enough, but you can send a feeling through eye contact. And the way to do it is actually pretty simple, but a lot of people don't do it because they're nervous when they make eye contact. You can do this in a crowded bar. It can be loud. You can do this across the cafe, across a cafe across the street. You can do it across a park. You could do it sitting in church, for Christ's sake. You can do it whenever you want to anyone, and they will get that feeling from across the room. And what they're doing psychologically is they're picking up on all these little minor facial patterns and these different expressions that you are giving, and they're so small that you couldn't possibly tell them apart outside of just a feeling you get. And and you can ask any woman this, she will trust her gut feeling before she trusts anything else because it's usually right. And you want to use that gut feeling that she has in order to evoke massive, powerful attraction. So what you do is look at a woman directly in the eyes, and you can practice with anybody you want. You can practice with a friend of yours, actually, if you want to. But next time you're looking at a woman in the eyes and you're talking to her, try thinking something really intently in your head. One of my favorite things to think in the beginning is look at her and think, "You're adorable," right? So that sort of state projects this really attractive quality in me that makes women think that I've already accepted them, but not so much that I'm going to sleep with them, right? And that's what a guy who has lots of options for women would do. He would say, "Well, you're really adorable and you're really cute, and all the things you're doing right now are really cute, but I don't really know you yet, so I wouldn't say that I'm going to sleep with you yet." Because if you have a lot of options, your the things that you measure an attractive woman by start to change. And as you start to get better with this, the things that you measure attractive women with are going to change for you as well. So keep that in mind. So you're going to be projecting that onto her. In the beginning, you're going to project you're adorable. A little bit later on, when you're connecting with her, you're going to project. You can be thinking in your head. Think the following phrase: I completely accept you for who you are. I completely accept you for who you are. You're going to be thinking that phrase over and over again in your head as you're looking at her and talking or thinking, as she's speaking as well. And what will happen is if you let this sort of hit you, it'll change your facial expressions. You should feel different whenever you think this. If you're feeling differently whenever you think it, then it's working. She's feeling differently too. In the beginning, like I said, you're going to be thinking, "You're so adorable." And that should change the way you feel. In fact, that should take a lot of anxiety away from approaching a woman. And then a little later on, you're going to be thinking, "I completely accept you for who you are." And then finally, you're going to be thinking, "I want to expletive you on the floor / couch / whatever." And you can literally think about her having sex with you, or her giving head to you, or whatever it is you want to think about that really turns you on during the stage of seduction. It will project that sexual state onto her. Now, of course, you can walk straight up and project that sexual state in the beginning, but it's very risky, and you can come across like a creep if you do it. I've done it before. It can work, but you have to know how to blow through the other states really quickly. And as you sort of go through and you use these different eye contact techniques, you're going to learn these skills, and you're going to get a little bit better and better and better as time goes on. So keep that in mind. So we're going to go on to the next technique, and that's called smiling with your eyes. This is a concept that will allow you to, if you're walking to say a room or bar, whatever, it doesn't matter if you're at a bar, in a cafe, whatever, your sort of default mode needs to be that you're smiling with your eyes. And what I mean by that is that you are not just smiling with your mouth. Smiling with your mouth doesn't mean anything. In fact, never smile with your mouth. It's not very important, not unless you're laughing or something. It's much more important that you smile with your eyes. And what I mean by that is that you have a sense of calm and a sense of amusement over your eyes. The way you do that is that you actually calm yourself and actually are amused by something. That's the only way you can truly do it. You can't fake this stuff. And so smiling with your eyes, if you just remember to do it, and what I usually do is I picture something funny. One thing I used to do is I used to picture, if I saw, this is a long time ago, probably about 5 years ago, whenever I first started, about a year into training on this stuff, I'd see a beautiful woman, and I was really nervous to go talk to her, but, I had to go talk to her, so I was going to. And I would picture her just taking the nastiest shit ever. I know it's kind of gross, but I would picture her just like breaking the toilet, just like horrible explosive diarrhea. And then it would just be so gross for me for a second that it would really bring her down in my mind to human level. And I would find that kind of amusing for myself. Then I'd walk up after that. And it was usually no problem for me to approach after I did that. But in the beginning, I had to really bring out something that was amusing, something that was sort of silly. I'm not going to say that that's a good thing to do all the time, by the way, and it may not work for you. But think of something that just sort of makes you amused. Think of something. My friend thinks of the Family Guy Peter Griffin laugh. I'm sure you know what that sounds like if you've ever seen Family Guy. But basically, he imagines Peter Griffin laughing, and then it just sort of makes him smile, and then he walks up afterwards, and and he walks into a bar. Now, whenever you walk into a place, and again, this is in the beginning of the Tao of Badass, one of the chapters. You have women are looking at your body language, and they're telling whether or not you're attractive in the beginning, just immediately from the very beginning. And if you don't have attractive body language, then you're sort of digging yourself out of a hole as time goes on. So if you're smiling with your eyes as a default, women will find that very inviting and very attractive. If you just try to smile with your eyes, as you look at a woman, she's going to think that you've already been attracted to her just by looking at her, and she'll have less of an incentive to really get to know you more because there's nothing to do. She's already won you over, so keep that in mind. The next technique is called the eye contact game. Let me check to make sure we're not missing anybody here. Again, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm here. The eye contact game is a game that I used to play in the beginning to really get good at having solid eye contact. I've used this over, the years. I think that originally I had first seen it from a guy who is named Owen Cook. He's a colleague of mine who does similar training to what I do. And he had this eye contact game. I don't really know where he learned it, but essentially what he would do is he would walk and he would get eye contact with a woman. And the way to get eye contact with a woman, by the way, is to actually look at everyone's eyes as you walk by. Only about 1 in every 10 people will look at you. But if you're walking down a street and there's 10 beautiful women, one's going to have solid eye contact with you. And if you do this eye contact game, you're going to evoke an emotion within her, and you are going to attract her. So that means you could attract 1 in every 10 women that walk down the street, possibly more. So the eye contact game is when you see a woman and you lock eyes with her, hold the eye contact and refuse to look away first. So just don't look away. Don't look away unless she does first. It doesn't matter who it is. Just look at her and keep the eye contact. It's going to feel weird. You're going to have all these weird, look away feelings. You're going to be like, I gotta turn. I can't keep looking. I can't keep this going. This is weird. Your brain's going to go crazy. You're going to try everything you can do within your power to try to stop you from making the solid eye contact. And I want you to keep it until she looks away first. And you'll almost always get her. She'll look down a little bit away from you, and she'll smile. Almost always. And when she's doing that, she's accessing her emotional brain because she's looking down because you just evoked an emotion within her. And then she's smiling because she can't help it. She can't help it. It's a positive emotion. So you can tell right then you made her feel attracted. And not only that, but you made her feel attracted in a dominant way. I also have the 3-second game that I used to play where I would hold eye contact for 3 seconds with everybody. But that's not the eye contact game. That was after I had mastered this game and I'd overcome it. Eventually, you want to get to the point where you're holding eye contact with a woman and you feel no nervousness. So it'll probably take about 20 or 50 tries on this. I mean, you have to do it solid for about 50 or 20 people. And after that, you are not nervous anymore, looking at women in the eyes and holding that eye contact. It's a really powerful technique. I'll go into another one in a bit here that's kind of similar. Now, here's something that's really cool that I don't really teach a lot of people because it's kind of a technique and it's small. And if you don't have a lot of other information, then you can't really use it. But if you're looking at a woman, a lot of guys have a hard time figuring out where to look on a woman. Well, obviously, you're going to be looking at her eyes. You can look lots of places. I know a couple places that I want to look in the beginning. But if you're looking at her eyes directly in the beginning, you can't really look at both her eyes at the same time. You can look at her nose or somewhere in between, but that's not as powerful. So which eye do you look at? Where do you look when you're talking to a woman? And where you look that I found is very, very powerful when you first meet a woman is into her left eye, which would be, the one on your right as you're looking at her. Now, if you just keep and look and talk sort of at that left eye there, if you look at her left eye and you talk, essentially what you're doing is you are appealing more to her conceptual brain because that's her left side. If you're appealing more to her conceptual brain, you're not hitting all of her logical barriers. So her left eye is associated with her right brain. Your right brain is your creative brain. Your right eye is connected to your left brain. Your left brain is your logical brain. So if she has logical barriers like, who is this guy? I don't know if I can trust him, blah, blah, blah. And you're talking into her right eye, you're going to be hitting all those barriers. It's like running through a lane with a bunch of hurdles. But if you look and talking to her left eye, you're going to have more of a chance that you'll be able to bypass all those hurdles and to sort of run free at full speed. and sort of bypass a lot of the different barriers she might have up. Um, Again, this technique alone doesn't work at all by itself. You have to use a lot of other things. You have to be projecting something as you're talking to her. But just fix on her left eye and just look at her left eye, and that's it. I do this with everybody now. I've done it since the day I heard it, and it's completely changed my game altogether with how I approach and attract women. It also allows me to feel like I'm in a lot more control than I was before. So again, as you're looking at her, imagine these two O's and look are her eyes. She's kind of wide-eyed here. But if that's the case, you're going to be looking into this eye here, her left eye. All right. Next, we're going to be talking about getting women to approach you using eye contact. Now, this is something that a lot of people ask about because the idea that a woman could approach you by having you look at her is a really powerful concept. Now, what I do here is something that I've done for a long time, and a lot of guys are too afraid to do. I implore you to do it. I really think that you should. It's a very powerful technique, and it's not very hard to do. It just forces you to not take yourself so seriously whenever you are meeting women. If you are taking yourself very seriously and you have an ego about it, you're not going to be good at this. I mean, you're going to get to a certain point, and then you're going to be outdone by every single one of my other students and followers and listeners as well, and readers, because people who drop their ego can learn faster and grow more, and they also attract women better. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. We've seen a lot of guys with huge egos attract women, but they're not the peak. They're not the echelon. There's a level beyond those guys that you can reach, and that really is utilized right here during getting women to approach you using eye contact. So let's say that you're in a place and you're talking, and you're talking to one of your friends, and you look over, or let's say you're by yourself even, and you look over and you happen to catch eye contact with a girl who's kind of across the room. Well, at that very moment, you have about 3 to 5 seconds to do something with your body language that will allow her to feel like she needs to approach you. Now, if you do that something too dominant, like stare down or wink or hold the eye contact or bow up, like kind of be strong looking or whatever, then she's gonna take a purely submissive role and she won't feel right approaching you. Does that make sense? I mean, if the guy's natural role is to approach a woman, and you make her feel like a woman right off the bat, she's going to expect you to approach her. Now, that's great. I think you should do that. But if you want her to approach you, then from the very beginning, when you first make that eye contact, what you have to do is you have to smile immediately and then wave. I know it sounds really silly, but stick your hand up and kind of wave and smile as if like you're a little kid maybe, not like kind of going crazy and wailing around. Don't make a big scene about it. Just smile and wave, and then keep smiling for a second and then kind of turn away. Now, the key is to turn away and turn your back a little bit and start to do something else. Talk to somebody, order a drink if you're at a bar, whatever it is, distract yourself for a bit. What you'll see, though, right here is that she's like, is he going to approach me? Is he going to approach me? When she realizes that you're not going to, but you're also not too afraid to, you're just distracted with something else, she's going to seize the day and go approach you. And, she may be a little nervous, whatever, but it's going to utilize that sort of fight or flight for her. Not every woman will do this, but a lot of them will. It's a really, really cool technique. So try using that. Now I want to talk about something that I use a lot that I don't teach very often because not a lot of guys do this either. It's called attention redirection. And using attention redirection to attract a woman, essentially use the following sort of concept, the following sort of series of things that you'll do. Let's say that you are, basically what we do is we judge whether or not someone's needy based on how attentive they are. And again, at the end of that last one, when I was telling you how to get a woman to approach you, the last thing I said to do is to divert your attention to something else. And the reason why is because if you were to stare at her, you're going to come across like you want to go talk to her, but you're afraid you're going to get rejected, which means that you already need this interaction to work well, which means you don't deal with a lot of beautiful women often, essentially. So that means that women, if you look at a woman and you don't approach her, women are going to think that you're afraid of being rejected, which means that you don't have a lot of options, because otherwise you wouldn't be that afraid because you have lots of options and it won't matter anyway. And then as you approach, you're going to need it so badly to go well to prove to yourself that that you're an attractive guy, that you're going to screw it all up anyway. So what I did, one of my favorite ways to meet women was to, and still is, if I were to go out and do this today, is to talk to a friend of mine or someone that I just met, a dude usually, talk to them. And as I'm talking to them, I'm looking around, and as I'm actually speaking, I'm looking around. not as they're talking, but as I'm talking. I'm looking around the room and I'm talking to my friend, but I'm looking around the room and I'm making eye contact with different women. And as I'm making eye contact, I'm smiling, sort of opening, and they're looking at me back and they're smiling. And as I get this sort of positive response from them, I'm not jumping straight to talk to them. Now, this is important. If you drop the conversation and you jump straight to talk to them, it sort of shows them that you are using this as a technique, and you can't do that. You can't show them that you're using it as a technique. It's got to be something very natural for you. So what you want to do is you want to have your attention focused on somebody else who you're not attracted to, and then as you're speaking, look around and gauge and build the attraction with lots of other people at one time. It's kind of an advanced technique, and I know that for me, I also incorporate winking a lot in this. Let's say that I'm talking to somebody and I look over and I'm talking to you, let's say. I look over, see a girl, and she looks at me and she smiles. I might wink at her for a second and smile and then come back and talk to you and continue the conversation. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to show her that I'm attracted, I'm dominant, but I'm busy right now. And as soon as I'm done talking to my friend, then I'll come over and I'll talk to them. Now, women respect this a lot more than if you were to jump up like a lapdog, leave the conversation that you're with your friend and run over there and figure out how to please them. Women find that extremely unattractive. So definitely stay away from doing that. And now I'm going to talk about creating a dominance vacuum, as it's called. A dominance vacuum is essentially whenever you create an empty space between you and someone else, and their natural tendency is to break the tension, right? So if you were to look at me in the eyes and stare at me, and I did this in a great program, by the way, is a guy named Christian Hudson has a program called, what's it called? He has a program called Fearless that I think is the one that I spoke on. He also has a couple other programs that are really amazing. But the program Fearless is, he also has Unbreakables is the other one. But Fearless is a really great program. And essentially, what Fearless is about getting over that fear of approaching women. And I gave a speech during that product that sort of showed a demonstration of how to create a dominance vacuum and how to keep from breaking the tension and how to see the tension. It's also a psychological space technique that I'll go into a little bit later. But essentially, what you do is you look at someone in the eyes, and as they're talking, they're going to talk and they're going to finish a sentence, and you're going to look at them in the eyes. And then you're going to take an abnormally long pause before you start talking. I would say 5 seconds without saying anything. And watch as they continue to talk. And if they continue to talk, let them talk more. And then after they stop, stare for a minute and just kind of smile. And watch them they start to get sort of submissive. Their body language starts to shift. They start to shrug their shoulders a little bit more. They start to smile and look down. They tilt their head down a little bit. When we tilt our head down, we're protecting our necks. Our chins come down, and they protect our necks. And what we're doing there is essentially we're making ourselves a little bit more safe. We're saying, "Hey, look, I'm a submissive person. Please don't hurt me." Basically, and when women do that, it's I'm not dainty, but sort of a fragile woman. Please don't attack me. You could dominate me so easily. Don't do that. Don't dominate me hard. And so she's basically taking that submissive role whenever you do that. So as she speaks, let her speak, and then don't say anything afterwards and keep looking at in the eyes. And if she keeps asking you what, then what you can do there is you can use one of very many different banner lines that I've used before. One that I've said before that's really powerful is I'm sorry, I didn't listen to anything you were saying. I'm just looking at how piercing your blue eyes are. And then I go, anyway, what were we talking about? And break the silence there and break that tension for them. And usually it's a really powerful technique, but creating that dominance vacuum and then breaking it away yourself shows such a powerful level of understanding and control for attraction. So it's a really cool thing to be able to do. So that is my big circle of eye contact techniques, and this sort of brings up the tail end here of the Body Language Mastery course, today's session of the Body Language Mastery course, which is on eye contact. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you took notes. If you didn't, that's okay. We'll be replaying this, and that's totally fine.